Welcome to the Two Grumpy Bastards podcast, where feelings aren't felt and snowflakes melt. Buckle up, it's gonna be a bumpy ride.
They painted over ants.
Alrighty, for those of you on the YouTube side, Russ and I just rocked out to Asia, Heat of the Moment.
What year did that come out? Was it? I know it's 80s. I just don't know when.
I didn't have to look. It's 1982. Here's why I know that, because it was the third vinyl album I ever bought in my life.
Okay.
Yeah, the first two.
Do I want to know?
No, it's okay. It was Joan Jett, I Love Rock and Roll.
That's awesome.
Survivor, Eye of the Tiger.
Both of those are awesome.
Yeah, those were the first three albums I ever bought.
Yeah, no, that I was suddenly transported back to the days of, Domino's Pizza, Ronald Reagan, and junior high school dances where you stood around and girls ignored you.
Yeah, I was telling a friend today, as a matter of fact, when I was at the gym, it's like the music was playing and it was dog shit, and I'm like, oh, you know what I was rocking out to earlier? All of Asia's catalog, and this is a much younger person. Like, oh, I love that stuff, and I'm like, oh yeah, go to their essentials on Apple Music and just download the whole thing. It stands up. It's great stuff. So I love that song. That was my favorite song.
And I'm not going to pretend. I was rocking out to the chorus of it's the heat of the moment, and I wasn't even going to try to lip sync the rest of it because I would look stupid because I don't know the rest of those words. I just remember the chorus.
Yeah, I probably was singing it really loud at one point because I had my earbuds in and was playing it at the gym, but that's all right. I don't care. Fuck them.
Given your size, who's going to come up and say anything?
Yeah, I know. Especially when I'm pushing iron, bro. Iron, I'm throwing up, bro. All right, hold on. I got to do my dramatic entrance for the YouTube folks. You ready? By the way,
surfing in.
This is one of my original photos, Storm King Photography. Here we go. Dramatic entrance.
You should have come in on like a surfboard or something.
Yeah, that'd be funny to watch me surf. Yeah, it'd be like a yak fucking a chicken on a 2x4.
When I was in Hawaii, I went surfing a couple of times, but the few times I actually got to stand up on the board, I was too far forward and I ended up going, head over heels into the water.
I haven't even tried because I know better. I know my thing. You give me a ball or you put me in an arena having to hit a guy, I'm a genius. Put me on a skateboard, water skis, snow skis, anything requires that kind of balance. I'm horrible. I mean, I'm literally the most uncoordinated thing on planet Earth. I just believe there's different muscle fibers and your wiring is just different because most of the guys that I know are good at that stuff are puny little wimps who could never throw a football more than about 15 feet. So,
well,
I said it.
I wanted to imagine myself being, Patrick Swayze or Keanu Reeves. I was maybe Keanu Reeves when he was falling off the board a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, I imagine. Yeah, I almost killed myself snow skiing. True story. Almost killed myself. Just absolutely smeared my collarbone, punctured my lung, had a bunch of broken ribs. Yeah, first time I ever went snow skiing. So
well, you like this. When I was in Kansas, we went over to the Missouri side and went to a ski resort / snow tubing site once, and took my youngest down on the snow tubing stuff. And she's not real big into doing. That's nice. She's not real big into doing the daredevil stuff that her older sister is. We got to the bottom and perfect Amelia-isms. She stood up and said, "Okay, that was terrifying. I'm never doing that again." Of course, this morning she had another Amelia-ism when we're leaving church, and she says, "I've noticed that most adults can't function without tea or coffee in the morning. I should probably start drinking it."
Oh my God, that's awesome. You're like, yeah.
Well, I was reminded, because you go through the Facebook memories. I was reminded of something just to prove that she was my daughter. She did about 2 years ago when she was in second grade. They're drawing, little colored fish because they're drawing little colored fish because they were 7 years old. And all of the other children naming their fish Sunny and Smiley and Happy Fish. And of course, Amelia decides to name her fish Dark Side.
Yeah, your daughter, she's being raised right. All right. Well, let's get into it, Russ. The first thing I want to do is get out of the way. It's just for a rewind. We were supposed to talk about the Tennessee debacle with a couple of your fine representatives there actually breaking the law, in my opinion, certainly obfuscating the genteel rules of the Tennessee legislature. So one of those heroes, I just want to show you a quick video that kind of illustrates this cult of personality, this the way these, I have these conversations all the time about the generation and the way these people are raised, and too much affirmation, too much being fed into these people. So let me just show you this video. Dude is totally channeling like Martin Luther King or some shit. I don't even know.
Malcolm X, I believe.
What's that?
If it's a video I'm thinking of, he's trying to channel Malcolm X.
Malcolm X, well, yeah, and Martin Luther, what he's saying, and probably a little bit of Don King thrown in for good measure. Here we go.
Guilty, guilty, guilty. And so, for you guilty people, the people got a message. We gonna build this movement. 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 You and you and you and you and you and we gonna build this movement.
All right, that's all I can take. That's all I can take.
Yeah.
You're going to build what movement is that? The movement that you live in a wonderful country where you are so a douchebag who's a criminal, who's uneducated, was allowed to, as far as the ways of people and the ways of governance, is got elected to an office, and then you can become some type of cult of personality figure. Oh, you mean you got a movement against that, huh? Good.
Yeah. If I don't know if you've seen the picture of what he was like in college.
Yes. Yes.
Where he's very, very different, playing to a different audience.
He's very Urkel-like, for those of you that remember the reference.
Yeah, he was running for student government, I believe, at Bowdoin College, I believe.
Yes, you're correct.
And he was very buttoned down, like you said, very Urkel-like. He's playing to an audience. That's what he's doing with all this. He's going for a very Malcolm X feel. For those who don't know, it was kind of insurrection-y, what the jackass did and his friends. They basically took over the floor of the Tennessee state legislature with bullhorns, shouting with some of the protesters. Now, imagine the outcry if Matt Gaetz or Laura Boebert or Marjorie Taylor Greene had grabbed bullhorns during the January 6th riot and started agitating in the middle of the House chamber. Imagine the calls for expulsion would have been, well, it wouldn't have just been calls for expulsion. People would have called for them to go to jail.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's a couple of different angles on this, both of which kind of show the stupidness of our society. The first, there was one woman whose name is escaping me, the woman who was up for expulsion and survived by one vote. Give me half a second.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. I don't know why I was blanking on. I don't remember her name either, but of course I know what you're talking about.
Let's see. What was her name?
She's just as
Gloria
pathetic.
Johnson.
Yeah, she's just as pathetic in her own way, by the way.
Well, the thing was, she went on the floor during the procedures for expulsion and talked about how, well, I wasn't actually down there with a bullhorn. I was just on the floor. I wasn't agitating. And then as soon as she survived by one vote, she's, the only reason they expelled these other two guys is because they were black. So she was playing it up. Like I said, when she survived by one vote, it made me wonder, who was she fucking?
I saw her.
Somebody.
I saw her. I hope nobody there was doing that.
You know how guys' standards tend to go down sometimes, especially depending on how.
I'm talking to the expert. I'm talking to the expert on that. Yeah.
But I'm just saying, look, she had, whether it was some kind of, holdover on somebody surviving by one vote, there's something's going on there.
I agree. Go ahead.
And then the second piece of stupid is give those folks credit for being able to get in the limelight, because the Tennessee state constitution, Tennessee legal code, does not have any provision saying that once you are expelled, you can't come back to the legislature like that. And
Right.
so the Nashville City Council and the Memphis Shelby County Council just sent them straight back. So, what was the point besides a bunch of, hoopla? They need to amend the Tennessee state constitution to say, if you are expelled from the legislature, you cannot return for a period of 10 years, at least, if not permanently. But otherwise, it's a bad boy, don't do that again.
Yeah, it wasn't even that. Actually, you got him notoriety and fame and a whole lot. I mean, even Biden's team tweeted out on Biden's behalf about civil rights and free speech and all that kind of stuff. It's so ridiculous that anybody from that side would talk about free speech in any extent at all. But my big thing about that is like, come on, Koop, you're not being fair. They're just exercising their free speech rights. There are certain organizations and certain things you do in life where you amend, if not give up, some of your civil rights by ex parte of being part of that organization. Russ and I understand that as being prior military. You do not have all of your civil rights that you enjoy as a regular citizen in the military as you do out there. Period. Over. Have a nice day. For instance, all of our injuries, we're not allowed to sue the federal government for everything that happened to us. We're not allowed to do that. There's certain things. First Amendment rights, you do not have those in the United States Army. You do not. You can and will, depending on your political speech, get your ass kicked out, or even worse.
There were soldiers that did get kicked out for expressing stuff like that.
Yes. So my big thing is, you're in the State House of Tennessee. Act like it. Fucking act like it. And you're not in an activist role. I know somehow politicians have smeared those lines, and now politicians are becoming activists, and that has never been the fucking point of it. Anyway, I'll leave it at that. I didn't want to go down the rabbit hole. We got lots to talk about, but I wanted to share that with the folks. And that was what's his name, Pearson, by the way, right?
Yeah. I can't remember Justin Pearson, I think.
Yeah,
Justin Pearson, I think.
There was two Justins, so I get it back where I get it stuck in my head. So anyway,
but yeah, that again, they need to check. They need to amend. I've actually gotten some responses back in the past from my state rep. I need to write them again and say, hey, y'all need to either amend the law, or if the law is not enough, amend the state constitution to say they can't come back. Last note on this, notice how Karine Jean-Pierre talked about how Biden is going to invite those gentlemen up to the White House. But I noticed that they're not inviting the families of the folks who were massacred at Covenant School in Nashville, which sparked all of this.
No, you wouldn't want to invite a bunch of Christian folks to a White House that represents a Judeo-Christian nation founded on Judeo-Christian values. You wouldn't want to do that,
especially if their attacker has a manifesto and that might be inconvenient to the current national narrative that they're trying to push.
I collected, and oh my God, I can't believe her name is slipping my head right now, but the mother from Detroit, who's been on all over the news and congressional hearings talking about her son, prior military, who was murdered, black lady.
I know who you're talking about. I can't remember her name, but yeah, she tore Jerry Nadler a new ass.
Yeah, and I've got a collection of video that I'm going to splice together for our next pod. I just kind of been trying to find it out there on the internet, and I need to put it all together for one. She's kind of a cool person.
Yeah.
So anyway, let's shift gears completely to a topic that we both are pretty passionate about: women's sports, and the influence of the transgender agenda and what that's been doing to women's sports. And there was a bill passed in the House recently, Russ, defending women's sports. Go ahead and give us a.
Well, yeah, the bill basically said that biological men are not allowed to compete in women's sports. It was a counter to a Biden proposed amendment to Title IX, because I guess now presidents can just wave their hands and enact the law. Good thing that we had that whole checks and balances issue going on.
That thing.
But his was like, hey, you can ban biological men only in certain instances, and they can be in prior to certain times and in certain sports. And so the House said, hey, look, biological men do not belong in sports with women. They passed it on a straight party line vote, something I want all the women out there to note. Not a single Democrat voted in favor, not one.
Insane.
They had to be cudgeled and corralled into saying that, hey, I guess they're fine with biological men being in women's sports. There are all kinds of issues, obviously, with that. You had the world's worst purple-haired athlete who is now retired, Megan Rapinoe, come out and say that you should allow biological men into women's sports. It's very convenient for her to do that now that her roster spot is not at stake. You had an issue recently with the volleyball player in North Carolina who got the ball spiked into her face, and she's got concussions and a couple of other issues as a result. It's not just the power. The net was lower because nets are lower in women's volleyball than they are in men's volleyball. We separate the sports for a reason. There are distinct biological differences. Koop, I don't know if you remember this. For those who don't know, we used to teach ROTC around the Sacramento area, and we once had an Air Force versus Army football game. It was flag football, but aside from you can't tackle the guy with the ball, everything else was legal. The blocking, the hitting, all that kind of stuff. I got up on the line. I reveled in playing a defensive lineman because I was 102 pounds soaking wet in high school.
I do remember.
At that point, I weighed somewhere around 175. So I reveled just in the irony of playing, a defensive end or defensive lineman. So I got up on the line, getting ready to rush the passer. And this little short Air Force chick got on the line opposite me. She's going to block me. Well, trying to be the gentleman I am, I moved to the other side of the line. I'm like, all right, I don't want to do this. I'm going to go to the other side of the line. Well, what happened? She followed me to the other side of the line. At that point, I was like, okay, welcome to the real world. And I mean, maybe she was either expecting me to hold back or had bought into all this superhero movie stuff. I think I knocked her back on her, flat on her ass, 6 feet. And then ran over her to get to I sacked the quarterback on that play. Because we're built differently, especially in contact sports like that. Men have denser muscles, stronger bones. We're faster. We have greater upper respiratory strength. That's not a knock on women. That's simply saying that's a reality of nature. If we mixed, John McEnroe got into trouble a few years ago for not saying that Serena Williams was the greatest tennis player ever. He said she was the greatest women's tennis player ever. And when pressed on why not just say she's the greatest ever, he said, well, if she was on the men's tour, she wouldn't break the top 200. And he was right. If you actually mixed the sports together, there would be no women's sports. Because as much as I hate to say it, they're not going to compete on the same physical level. It's just not going to happen.
Just to insert, just for 2 seconds, guess who agreed with him on that assessment?
Serena Williams.
Yep. Go ahead.
No, that was it. It's just when it comes to physical stuff, that is not to say that there aren't, women out there that are very physically in shape, that are very athletic, but take the top women's athlete in any sport and the top men's athlete in the same sport is always, and I don't mean 99% of the time, I mean literally 100% of the time, is always going to be better.
Absolutely. Without question. It's not even a debate. So thought I'd change my background for everybody.
Yeah, be a little bit peaceful with the flowers, the tulips.
For those roses. Don't go over to YouTube. It's worth it just to see this stuff. Yeah, don't worry. I'll be changing it quite a bit during this.
Just to get a reaction.
I just a quick shout out there for this genius photographer from Storm King Photography. All my background's brought to you by Storm King Photography. Okay. Where you can go to www.stormkingphotos.com for all of your photography needs. So yeah, the thing about this, Russ, is it is so fucking stupid to debate the other side of this, that there shouldn't be separate sports. They want to throw this exclusion clause at you and throw the transphobe label at you when you actually support this. It's insane. Where are all the feminists? Supposedly that Democratic Party is supposedly chock full of feminists. Where are you? You think this is okay? You're insane. And I don't know what you are. Number one. Number two, no, it's not transphobic to say it's not fair. I talked about what transphobia is last time, and this isn't fucking it. Disagreeing is not a phobia, okay? And wanting to support people that are in reality, not in some delusional universe, is not phobic. So I don't even understand how this is a debate. What could you do differently? I guess you could have a transgender third league or something like that. But you know what? I'm not even into that, because I will admit to you, when the bathroom debate started, how long ago did the bathroom debate in?
It really began in 2016 when North Carolina passed the bathroom bill, and for some reason people went ape shit. And I thought it was common sense to say men don't need to be going into women's restrooms. That
is when this slippery slope started happening. That is
and
when
we were all told at the time, you're being too hyperbolic. That's never going to happen.
Exactly. As with everything else. How dare you, you meanies, you bigots, you transphobic, Nazis, whatever. Yes, look where we're at. Every time I hear anything on the news, it's about this fucking issue. And it's such a small segment. And I truly believe that most of these people are either, like we've talked about, either delusional or fetishists. I'm sorry, that's my point. Again, doesn't make me hate you necessarily. If you're an asshole and you're a piece of shit and you're a groomer, I'll hate you. I'll hate you regardless if you're straight or whatever. It's ridiculous. I'll judge you as a human being. But I do disagree with setting the op tempo of this culture and this government by this. I'm tired. I'm tired of hearing it. I'm tired of hearing it to the point where I will be hostile if somebody brings it up to me, or if I get corrected one more fucking time on somebody's gender. I will. I'll be like, and I have said this, your delusion is not my problem. Period. Fuck off. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I don't want to be that way, guys. I don't want to be that way, but here I am.
Well, it is about people thinking they're not being mean, but it's just really weird. They're denying basic reality. But when you look at it also, somehow the feminists have become co-opted into supporting men taking them over. I guess the patriarchy always wins. I guess one bit of irony on this. Did you hear about the story in Canada?
I'm sure I did. Remind.
Right, there was a women's bench press competition.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, women's bench press competition. And then some transgender athlete that called himself, and I am going to say himself because he's a biological man, named Ann Andrews, who set the record at 124 kilograms, which is roughly, about 260 pounds, I guess. If my quick math there is accurate.
You're pretty close based on my math too. Yeah.
Well, but see, in Canada, they don't require anything except for you to declare that you are a woman. There's no testing of testosterone. There's nothing that you have to have gone through. You don't have to have been, claiming you're of the opposite sex for any length of time. All you have to do is mark on a form, you are a woman.
Right.
And they have to accept you by Canadian law. Well, so in order to prove a point, a man named Avi Silverberg, the head coach for the Team Canada powerlifting for more than 10 years, decided to say that he was a woman, and he entered and he smashed Anders' record by over 100 kilograms. Deadlifted 245 kilograms, which is roughly 500, which is roughly 500 something pounds, I believe.
Yes.
Yes. Just to show, all right, this is so stupid. I'm going to set this record, blow this transgender athlete away, and no one in that division is ever going to break that weapon. By the way, Silverberg has got a full-on beard. He went in wearing a wife-beater tank top.
I actually love this guy. I do.
It was the classic troll of all time.
It is one of the classic trolls of all time. You know what came to mind? This might be kind of delicate, but I'm going to bring it up because it popped into my head when I was thinking about this the other day, doing my long walk and listening to some ideas, some podcasts. There was a horrible movie. I can't remember how old it was, called The Ringer with Johnny Knoxville. Did you ever see that?
No, I'm not familiar with that one.
Okay, he pretends to be a special needs dude to enter the Special Olympics because he thinks the Special Olympics coach chick is hot. I'm not fucking kidding. Now, even
I know who Knoxville is, though. This sounds like him.
It does, and I love Johnny Knoxville. I love me some Johnny Knoxville. But okay, the movie is horrible. even then I was completely and totally uncomfortable with the idea of the movie. I was just like, how did this fucking get made? Even back then, of course, now he'd be taken out at dawn and pelted with, well, they none of them have guns, so I don't even know how they would execute him, but the left would figure out a way. And I was thinking that the other day, isn't that the natural next step? Maybe I should, claim to be handicapped and go compete in the Special Olympics. Now that's a disgusting thing to say, but really the logical conclusion about all this, if you can claim to be anything, you gotta fucking protect some institutions, people.
I don't know if you two other things real quick on this. First, I don't know if you remember, this movie came out in the 80s, and I was kind of surprised it even got made in the 80s. It's a movie with C. Thomas Howell called Soul Man.
Oh God, yes. It's so bad. It's so bad. It was bad then.
It was a horrible movie, but what happened was C. Thomas Howell couldn't get into the college he wanted to, I believe. And in order to take advantage of affirmative action, he took an overdose of self-tanning pills so that he could be transracial.
Yes.
And to be fair, there's probably more of a case to be made because our melanin count affects how we interact with the world less than our gender does.
Right.
So yeah, I didn't know if you remembered Soul Man.
Remember it very, very well, because even then,
shit.
In my teen years, and it was kind of a big deal. I was uncomfortable with it because he was so glaringly obvious a white guy in blackface and he did look nothing like a black person. And then the fucking kicker to this is James Earl Jones played the teacher at the law school that he got into.
That's right.
At Harvard Law. What next? Cindy Poitier is going to be his grandfather. Fuck me. And incidentally, C. Thomas Howell was on the Adam Carolla podcast probably a month or so ago. Well, probably a couple months ago now. And you love the guy. I mean, he was so much fun. He looks nothing. I mean, you can tell it's C. Thomas Howell, but if a cigarette was animated while smoking a cigarette, that's what he looks like. and he's got like a country album out now. Remember,
I'm gonna have to look this up.
Yeah, I remember. He's been married like 4 times, and he's like wanting him to drink whiskey with him on the podcast. I mean, he's a man's man. I love him to death. A lot of great movie memories with him and him as a kid, of course. But anyway, that's incidentally. But yeah, that was so bad, and it's just. I mean, I'm foreshadowing way ahead of time, 30 years ahead of time, I guess. I don't know. Fucking crazy.
And then back to purple hair stupid person, Megan Rapinoe. Just a gentle reminder, and I believe Koop, you brought this up before. All right, the United States women's national team are the world champions by a mile. They are unquestionably the best women's soccer team in the world.
Yep.
They are the favorites for every World Cup.
And I was happy to watch that. I was really happy. Really happy. I watched all of that. It was great.
Yeah, they won 2 World Cups in a row. They're probably the favorite going into the next one. But let's not forget that this same team lost to a group of 14-year-old boys 5-2 in a friendly scrimmage.
Yep.
This wasn't like, some college women's team or something that took on high school and junior high school boys. This was the women's world champions taking on a group of 14-year-old boys and got crushed. For those who don't know, I know y'all will call me a communist for even bringing up soccer, but 5-2 in soccer is a spanking. That is not a close score. And so I noticed that, Rapinoe is not going out for the men's team. And I noticed how convenient it is. I mean, could you imagine if Christian Pulisic or Weston McKennie started wearing their hair long and claiming that they were a woman and they belonged on the U.S. women's national team? What might finally make an impact on this? And this is what it would take. It would take somebody who's got what I call fuck you money and doesn't care. But it would take a LeBron James level NBA athlete who's nearing the end of their career, or a bench warmer who never gets on, declaring themselves a woman and going and dominating the WNBA. Or you get some, backbencher from the men's national team in soccer, declaring themselves a woman and going out and scoring 10 goals, by himself in the women's game. It would take that before the outrage actually was like for people to say, you know what, maybe this isn't a very good idea.
Yep. You like my background?
I do. It's and for those who don't know, by the way, the rainbow has been co-opted by the alphabet mafia.
Right.
The rainbow was originally, it's held very deeply in religion because according to Christian doctrine, the rainbow was a symbol of the covenant that God made with man to never destroy the world by flood again.
I'm going to have to do a segment here soon on the origin of the pride flag, where it actually comes from and what it actually stood for, because it's not what people think. It's not a peaceful celebration of diversity. So I will do that. I'll put that together for one of our next videos or podcasts or something. So, anything else on that subject? It just seems so inherently obvious to me that I can't even believe you have to pass a fucking law protecting what is just inherently common sense and right. What is just right.
I really do believe that at least 50% of the people who are saying that this stuff should be allowed, at least, if not more than 50% of the people who are saying this stuff are scared of being yelled at by their own side.
Yeah.
They don't want to be seen as
fucking cowards.
They don't want to be seen as siding with the right. They don't want to be seen as mean. And so they're saying this stuff so that they can stay on the ends. If they actually had any kind of courage, they would tell their own side, all right, guys, this is too much. I mean, look, Bill Maher, you and I have discussed him in the past. I think he's played a large role in the polarization of society today based on his stuff in the early 2000s. But even Bill Maher, as far left as he is, has come out and said, well, all right, we're going too far. This is too much. And if anybody had the courage of their convictions, this movement would be relegated to the fringes where it belongs.
Bill Maher is a classic case of the guy who's extremely bright, intellectually, astute, gets nuances and things, can see things for what they are. I used to hate his guts for some of the things he said in the past, but he was, in the world of dialectical behavioral therapy, you've got the wise mind, you got the rational mind and the emotional mind, which completely channels things differently. The combination of those two somewhere on the spectrum is wise mind, where human beings are supposed to be using both emotion and logic. I think a lot of people that from a certain background just couldn't get out of that, like with Trump derangement syndrome. Yep. There's some people I would think that are normally fairly intelligent people who are so sunk into that. And it's wiring in the brain. I really do believe that. I don't think it's socialization necessarily. I think there's a pre-wiring. And there's been studies, by the way, folks, where they've looked at people with a conservative or a leftist point of view, and they have found brain differences. I'm not saying good or bad or other. I'm just not IQ differences or anything like that. I'm just saying wiring differences. There is a lot of evidence that you are genetically predetermined to be one or the other to a certain extent. But you get people, I don't know that Bill Maher ever wasn't along this train of thought. I just think he let the emotional side of him influence him far more as he's getting to be an older man. And it took him 7 years to get solar put onto his house because of regulations in California. He brings that up famously. Yep. He started to, the old saying, a Republican is a Democrat who hasn't been mugged yet, or a Democrat is a Republican who hasn't been mugged yet. Sorry, I got that backwards. There's a certain amount of truth to that. So, Dave Rubin is another example of that, a guy that considered himself a lefty, and, he's still pro-choice, he's gay, he's married, but he's very conservative to libertarian in his viewpoints. Yeah,
but see, Rubin no longer considers himself a lefty. Bill Maher does.
I'm doing good. How are you? Pretty good. Okay.
Hey, just real quick, if you ever want to see something funny, I don't know, are you aware of the TV movie the science fiction movie that Bill Maher once made?
Oh, I am, but I can't remember.
It's called Out of Time, where he plays a nerdy pro-inventor cop that comes up with all these gadgets, and his either grandson or great-grandson traveled back in time and is actually trying to guide him along the path to become the supposed greatest cop ever. If you ever want to laugh, look for the movie Out of Time. I think I saw it when it first came out way back in like 1990 or 1989. It's been a long time. But if somebody wants to have fun with Bill Maher, they need to play part of that movie for him because it is hysterical.
That kind of could dovetail into the subject you want to talk about. But before we get there, let's do Koop's cold hard facts to get that not out of the way. But it's something I want to examine. So, guess what, folks? You're gonna get A PowerPoint presentation. So Russ, today I wanted to talk about taxes and specifically this idea that the rich don't pay their fair share of taxes. This is not sitting here and advocating or for the rich or against the poor, but I think if you look at the cold hard facts of who pays the taxes in this country, some folks might simmer down a little bit. I know Joe Biden just tweeted on this recently. Well, he didn't, because his tweets would say, "Eggplant, the Muslim," but he definitely, somebody tweeted out about how the rich need to pay their fair share of taxes, and AOC beats this up all the time, but she's a fucking idiot mouth on legs. So let's just get into this. Taxes. Do the rich pay their fair share? That's what we're going to talk about here today on Koop's Cold Hard Facts. Well, the facts as usual, Russ, are contrary to popular opinion. What a shocker. We're going to go to the next slide here, and we're going to begin to, and hop in anytime, Russ, on this. I'm going to kind of, normally I wouldn't read the bullets, but for our podcast listeners, I'm going to go ahead and do that. Sorry, YouTubers. The wealthy in America bear the heaviest share of income tax burden than any time in recent history, and that's absolutely true. I said recent history because I couldn't find a time where it was different than it is now, but I didn't want to, at any time in history, I didn't know that was a fact. I can certainly go back to the Reagan administration way back then on the tax records and prove this. Real quick, 53 million low and middle income taxpayers pay no income tax whatsoever. 53 million in a country of, give me, what's I don't even know what the percentage would be on that. I didn't do the math ahead of time.
It's going to be somewhere around 17 to 18%.
Okay. So I'm not against people not paying taxes based on their income. That's not what's going on in this bullet, but I think people don't realize how many people actually don't pay any income taxes. And we'll get into, not only do they not pay any income taxes, they get an abundance of benefits back from the government, percentage wise. It's crazy. 6 out of 10 households receive more in direct government benefits than they pay in federal taxes. 60% receive more in direct government benefits. Now, what does that mean? Well, that counts a lot of things. That counts, Medicare, Social Security. It counts subsidies, and it counts welfare. It counts all of these things that go into basically what government gives you. So this is kind of weird. So you think paying taxes, basically paying your fair share, paying your fare in order to be able to enjoy the benefits of being an American citizen. Meanwhile, at the Hall of Justice, businesses pay or remit 93% of the nation's taxes. Okay, this is businesses, folks. This is corporate taxes and small business taxes. And even in my tiny little businesses that I have, insignificant, an army of one in my businesses, I have to pay business taxes. Okay. And not having a lot of capital, it actually kind of hurts. Go ahead.
As I say, so do I with my little writing stuff.
Yeah. And I'm okay with that. I'm not saying it's not fair, but as we'll go through here, we'll see that increased corporate taxes. Everybody says, "Oh, we need to tax the corporations." Oh, not okay. Anyway, workers bear at least half of the economic burden of corporate taxes through lower wages. With women, the low-skilled and younger workers impacted the most. So that wasn't a really great construction to that sentence, but basically what we're getting at here is workers are bearing the economic burden of these corporate taxes. And of course, corporate taxes are going to affect the women in the workforce, the low-skilled and younger workers who are working maybe their first job at a minimum wage or even, going up the ladder. They're paying for it in a multitude of ways. Go ahead, Russ.
I just want to make a couple of points about some of the stuff on the slide. First of all, you mentioned about people who pay no income taxes. A lot of folks will say, "Well, I get stuff taken out of my check every month." Well, there's two things you're missing. Number one, the one thing you're getting taken out of your check that you're not going to get back immediately, but is in theory going to come back to you, are your Social Security taxes. That's more of the, as Al Gore would say, the lockbox. And then second, all of the rest of the folks who see FICA coming out of their check, they don't realize they're not being taxed on anything. Basically, they're giving the government a year-long interest-free loan because they're going to get all of those income taxes back. All they have to do is file, and they will get every bit of that FICA that they paid to the government. They're going to get that back. So no, they're not paying taxes. I know you see it coming out of your check. Congratulations, Uncle Sam has played you for a sap for a full year and said, I'm going to hold on to your money and use it, and I'm not going to pay you any interest. And by the way, if I have, as I've discovered over the last few years, if I end up owing more, I believe it's more than $1,000, I have to pay an additional penalty on top of that. But if Uncle Sam holds on to my money, he doesn't have to pay any additional penalty on top of me. The second thing I want to note, when we say the wealthy bear the heaviest burden of the income tax in any time recent history, what a lot of people want to try to bring up to me is they say, well, you know, in the 50s and early 60s, the highest tax bracket was 90%. Well, that's misleading in a lot of ways, because a lot of people just, because they don't want to probe past the headline, they'll simply say, look, they were paying 90% and we were doing awesome. Well, first of all, nobody paid 90% taxes. Nobody. The tax bracket may have been at 90%, but there were so many loopholes and deductions and carryovers that the tax rate, actually the effective tax rate was still about equal to what it is now, which meant that they paid about a quarter of their income in taxes, because they knew how to take advantage of the tax code, because it was so complex after World War II. Speaking of World War II, when people say, hey, you know, that we were paying 90% in taxes in the 50s and we were doing awesome. Well, yeah, you know why? Because the rest of the world was in ashes. We had just come out of the most destructive war in history. Japan was not going to be on its feet for another 15 years. Europe was still rebuilding. They were still, you know, scraping rubble off the streets. Of course, we were doing awesome. We were protected by two giant oceans. It had nothing to do with the tax rate. It had to do with the fact that we bombed the rest of the world back into the Stone Age. And people don't seem to understand that. And then last thing I'll bring up, and maybe we could have covered this later, but I'll cover it now, is the initial tax rate when taxes were introduced, I believe in 1917. I don't remember the exact year. I'd have to go back and look. It only applied to like the top 1% of earners, and it was like 1% of income, or like between 1 and 5%. It was very, very tiny, minute. It was to help fund World War I. It had nothing to do with people paying their fair share. When I hear people pay their fair share, we'll get into this more later with some of the other graphs, but that's bullshit.
It is bullshit. Yeah, no, I don't have anything to add to that. That's all real good points. Just to talk about this real briefly so people understand the difference between liquid and illiquid. Yes, those are actually the terms. I didn't make that up. Liquid assets are the basic, sorry to offend all of you that understand economics 101, but liquid assets are basically anything that you can immediately have at your disposal. Checking accounts, bank accounts, savings accounts, anything that you can turn into quick, fast cash money. Okay. Illiquid assets are things that would take you a while to actually be able to turn into money. Okay. And by money, I do mean things that you can use in commerce immediately. Those would include businesses, stock portfolios, mutual funds, certain things like that, you know, any of those type of assets that a racehorse would be considered illiquid, because it's really hard to sell a racehorse, or anything like that is illiquid. Now I didn't put a slide up because this could have went on forever, but the vast majority of all billionaires in the United States of America, most, and I didn't get a percentage, but the vast majority, again, of their income, quote unquote, or their fortune is in illiquid assets, not liquid assets. Even the richest guy at the world at the time, our hero Elon Musk, had to liquidate some of his illiquid assets to buy Twinker, I like to call it, Twitter. It took him a while to be able to scrape together the liquid assets to be able to do that, okay, including stocks in Tesla, some other things. So that's really important too. When you look at income, billionaires typically don't have a huge income. That's not the deal, but they own a lot of shit. Go ahead, Russ.
Yeah, and the reason that's important is because Pocahontas, as I like to call her, Elizabeth Warren, has tried proposing a tax on wealth. First of all, there's nothing more certain to have people flee the country than to tax their wealth, so they have to sell off part of what they already own in order to pay the tax. It's also, by the way, probably unconstitutional.
Yeah, I think it is unconstitutional, yes. Yeah, and we do get into that in a couple of slides here.
But the other thing is that, you know, we talk about illiquid assets and what people are worth. We see, hey, the wealthy have all this stuff. Well, you know, there's a little bit of a difference in that back in, I believe it was 2008 during the financial crisis. On paper, Warren Buffett, when the market tanked, went down by like, I don't know, $250 million or $1 billion, whatever he went down by. And folks said, "Hey, do you feel bad about losing that much money?" And he said, "I didn't lose that much money. I haven't sold anything."
Yeah,
It
it's
doesn't
a
become a
wonderful
loss
point.
until you turn it into a liquid, until you turn it into money.
Right.
And so if you hold on to it, I haven't lost anything on paper, sure, but I haven't lost anything in reality, because I can wait for if it goes right back up and then I decide to sell it, well, I can still make money off of it.
Yeah, and over history, anybody that sits on their stocks is going to make money. That's just what happens with the stock market. That's absolutely, since the stock market was invented. All right,
including during the Great Depression.
absolutely. Yep. Okay, here's a cool graph. I like this one a lot because this kind of lays it out. And Koop is going to put on his reading glasses because I can't see the screen very well. How do I look, Russ?
You look awesome. Very
Thanks, man.
intellectual.
Yeah. I got these half price at glassesusa.com, a new sponsor of the show. No, I wish they were. So this is broke down into 2018, and some of this, yeah, it's a few years old, but the numbers haven't changed. Maybe by a 0.5% here, 0.5% there. And I didn't feel like making a bunch of graphs, and I managed to find this one at the Tax Foundation webpage based on oh shoot, I can't remember what year it was, 2021. It was to the which committee was it? The Congressional Ways and Means Committee.
Yeah.
A presentation. So what you're looking at here, you're looking at the wealth in America based on gross income of the top 1%, the top 5%, top 10% to 5%, broken down basically in different ways and shapes and means all over the place here. But what I really want to talk about here, you have two bars. You have the bottom 50%, and at the very top of the graph, you have the top 1%. Share of a total adjusted gross income. So that means that basically what share of all of that gross income do these people pay? Now, 20.9%, okay? That is their share of total adjusted gross income. So again, 20.9% isn't very high when people think, oh, billionaires must make a lot of money. That again illustrates, that's why we brought it up, the liquid versus illiquid assets. Billionaires might have a lot of stuff. They might have wealth, but that wealth doesn't mean anything that they actually can get rid of. If you look, the next 5 to 1% on that, so the 95 percentile, 15.5. It goes down on the 10th percentile, 11.2%, so on. It's really not, it's what you wouldn't necessarily expect that, right? You would expect the billionaires to have a really high number, and the bottom 50% is at 11.6%. If you look at it, except for that number of the billionaires, it really isn't really anything to sneeze at. Now, the interesting thing to me, Russ, is the 10% to the 5%. So that 5 percentile between 90 and 95%, 11.2%. It goes drastically down from 15.5 to the top 5%. And then it goes way back up to that 25 to 10%, that 15% there, from 75% to 90%. That's 21.3%. Kind of interesting. Now, before you chime in, let me just hit what's really important about this graph. Share of total income taxes paid. Now, this is the percent of all income taxes paid. So if you look at the disparity in the top 1% between 20.9% of adjusted gross income and the taxes they pay, the total income, it's 20.9%, but they pay 40.1% of the income tax. Well, how's that work? Shouldn't it be about the same number? Theoretically, but that again shows you how much of the tax burden the wealthy are, despite the fact that liquid assets aren't necessarily what they've got. As you go down, you can see, and I got a summary here down below here. The top 1% of taxpayers paid $616 billion in income taxes. Okay, that's that 1%. 40% of all income taxes paid. That is a larger share of the tax burden than the bottom 90% of all taxpayers combined. Bottom 90%. So everything from that little magical middle right there, the 25 to 10% and down, 1% is paying more than all those people put together. Pretty interesting, right, Russ?
Yeah, and you would think in a fair system that the amount of taxes paid would be equivalent to the amount of income earned. But it's not. As you can see in the top 1%, do they have the money? Yes, but they are paying double the amount of taxes based on the amount of income that they bring in.
Right.
This shows, if were I king for a day, aside from making sure I found a really cool crown to wear with the fuzzy stuff and the star of India diamond in there, I would make sure that whenever taxes went up or went down, it applied to everybody, because it is very easy to say, hey, raise taxes on those guys over there. It's a lot harder for you to say, by the way, well, let's raise taxes and let's all pay more. I used to think that we should try to, alleviate the tax burden from as many people as possible. I don't believe that anymore, because again, it's too easy to say, raise taxes on somebody else. I think everybody should pay some share of taxes, even if it's small, and everyone should be affected by a rate increase.
I agree with you completely, and we won't get into the flat tax argument today, but I'm a big flat tax guy. I am, and there would be gradations in the flat tax, but it would actually immediately fire about 1 million IRS employees, because you'd no longer, and you'd save billions of dollars a year just in wages and administrative costs in the IRS. The most bloated, and there's a lot of studies, the most bloated, obtuse, obese government agency in the entire governmental system. Oh, by the way. So one more thing to point out here, Russ, that I thought was interesting. When you look at the bottom 50%, that's 50% of the wage earners' salary in the United States of America. So you're basically talking in today's dollars, people that make $69,000 a year and less. Okay. $69,000 a year isn't a lot in today's dollars, but it's a hell of a lot better than a lot of people are doing. It was a hell of a lot more than I made when I was a young Army officer, up, all the way through captain. So their adjusted gross income tax is 11.6%, but they only pay 2.9% of the total income taxes paid. So that's 50% of the population. Literally 50% of the population pays 2.9%.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's not so much that the bottom 50% pays 2.9%. It's that they also bring in 11.6%. So they bring in almost 4 times as much income as opposed to the amount of taxes that they pay. And
they're the only. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I would say that's unconscionable to me. I've grown more and more towards the flat tax as a result, because again, folks say, well, that hurts the poor more. I don't agree. I mean, if I bring in $1 billion and the tax rate is 25%, I'm still paying a shitload more than the folks who don't have a lot of income. I'm paying $250 million. You could say, well, you can live, quite handsomely on, just $600 million, so you should pay 40%. Well, it's not your job to tell me how well I can live or what I can do with my money. There's a matter of simple fairness, and the government deciding who should pay more based on whether or not you are successful. And I don't mean more in terms of raw amount. I'm talking more in terms of percentage. I think that's the government penalizing people for being more successful, as opposed to saying everybody pay a similar rate across the board, so that we have a distribution of fairness.
Amen. I don't have anything to add. Next slide, please. Did I say that? How'd you like that? Did that give you a nice flashback right there?
Only if you wore a wig like Vanna White.
Next slide, please. Yeah. Next slide. Next. I just usually just said next, like a lot of asshole bosses did. Okay. This is kind of incidental, but I thought it was interesting to throw in here. The percentage of tax filers who owe zero income tax has climbed thanks to successive increases in tax credits. Back in 1980, when Jimmy Carter was getting his ass kicked out and Ronald Reagan came on board, it was at percentage of tax filers who owed zero income tax was at 21%. This graph, if you had a trend line, would be trending up at about a 45-degree angle over time, over 26 years that this was tracked, or 36 years, I apologize. Is that 36 years? Yeah, 36 years. 36 years that this has been tracked. So if you look, it's got a couple of things here, our podcast listeners. In 1986, when it was right around 18%, it did dip down in the mid 80s. The 1986 tax reform expanded the zero bracket. So it was on a steady rise to the late 80s, early 90s to the mid 90s. The Bill Clinton per $500 per child credit kicked in 1997. So it saw another upsurge. Now it saw another, I'd say, another hump climb against the trend line here. And the 2001 tax bill doubled child credit to $1,000. So there was $1,000 people got to keep in their pockets. And I'm not judging these acts by any stretch of imagination. The overall slide is what I'm trying to point out. 2009, the Recovery Act, created by Making Work Pay Credit, had this thing jump up, Russ. You can see the huge jump between 2008 and 2009, 2010 there. It went from, let's look at that, probably about 36% to 42% of tax filers owe zero income tax. 42%. Okay. Now that's come down. I do have 2021. I didn't get 2022. This has it at 2017 at 34.7%. It's currently at about 38%, Russ. So it's still on the high side of 35%. Now, the quick summary of this, the lower quintile, and for those of you that don't know what quintile means, the bottom 25% faced a negative 10.9% income tax rate. What that means is their income tax dropped by 10.9%, negative 10.9%. The second quintile faced a negative 1.0% income tax rate. So they still dropped, but the rich and the middle, upper middle, all went up during that period. Russ?
You covered it very well. Again, it gives people lack of a stake in the system. And I think that allows people to be a lot more dismissive of the concerns of others because they don't have to share those concerns.
One of the things that's consistent that you can look at there is with Republican and Democratic administrations, the tax rate for the poor dropped. The lower quintile of this country, and even the 50 to 25%, that second quintile from the bottom dropped as well. For the next two quintiles, it went way up. Let's look at the breakdown. So what this shows you, and like I said, 2017, I couldn't find any I had to put graphs together if I wanted to do anything more recent, but it really hasn't changed a whole lot, except for the amounts, the percentages haven't changed. So the 2017 income group here, podcast listeners, were shown a graph that breaks it down: the lowest quintile, second quintile, middle quintile, and fourth quintile, and highest quintile. Okay, and I said 25%. I meant to say 20%. So let me correct myself on that. I just realized I said 25%. So it breaks it up into fifths. Direct benefits received to taxes paid. So we were talking earlier about what is the benefit you get from the taxes? What benefits do they get from the government as opposed to how much you're paying in? Well, this is per dollar paid, by the way. That's what this is laid out. Lowest quintile, you get $67.67 back.
Quite a return.
What's that?
That's quite a return.
Yeah, I'd take that in my stock market portfolio, my friend.
Oh yeah, and then I'd retire in a couple of years.
Yes, absolutely. Second quintile, $4.68. Middle quintile, $1.60. So I won't read all these off to you because it's a progressive. I could plot the statistical mean on this. The huge drop off is between the lowest quintile and the second quintile. But once you get, it breaks it down. Once you get to the higher quintile, it breaks it down even further, which is kind of nice. The highest quintile, which you're talking the 80 to 100, the 80 to 1%, is 15 cents on the dollar. Okay. And again, if you break down that quintile into three separate events, 81st to 90th quintile, 36 cents, 91st to 95th is 22 cents. And the upper 4%, or excuse me, 96th to 99th decile. So it's using those terms, 12 cents on the dollar. Top 1% is receiving 2 cents on the dollar. 2 cents on the dollar, folks.
Yep.
So
that would be, you'd be broke if you had that rate of return.
Yeah, 2 cents on the dollar, baby. That's what they're getting. So yeah, the rich are really benefiting, right?
Of course they are.
This is astonishing. I did break this down. Check this stat out here, Russ. The bottom 3 quintiles collectively receive more than 1 trillion in government benefits, more than 1 trillion in government benefits than they paid in all federal taxes. That's how much tax did they pay, and how many benefits did they get out of it? Bottom 3 quintiles got 1 trillion. That number is actually inconceivable. If you ask me, so what's a billion, Koop? I'd say a billion minutes ago, Jesus Christ walked on the face of the earth. That's what I would tell you. That's what a billion is. Now, a trillion is a order of magnitude bigger than that. So you can imagine how much money that actually is. 60% of American households receive more in benefits than they pay in federal taxes. 60%. So that goes above that mean of $69,000 a year. Just throw that in there, guys. That goes above that mean. Households in the top 20% pay 1.7 trillion more in taxes than they receive in direct benefit. That's the top 20%. That's a top quintile. And the bottom 3 quintiles get 1 trillion back. The top 20% pay 1.7 trillion more. Guys, folks, loyal Americans, hardworking blue collar people, I love you very much, but the rich pay the taxes in this country.
But what it is we also are so caught up on class envy. One of the presuppositions in almost every person in America, whether they want to admit it or not, is, hey, person over there has more than I do. I'm just as good as they are. Therefore, they must have gotten it by cheating. So since they cheated the system, they deserve to pay more. That's what it is. It's a lot of it's a jealousy, envy thing. Now, I'm not talking about the practicality of if you make more money, you should pay more in raw taxes. Absolutely, I agree with that. That's the way the system has to work. But in terms of percentages that you pay and what you receive, it's based on envy, because, if things were fair across the board, then damn it, I would have just as much as that asshole over there.
Yep. One more graph that kind of illustrates the same thing. Income gained or lost due to tax, direct spending, benefits by income group. We're breaking down into quintiles again. This illustrates it really well. So the lowest quintile, income gained is $496. Second is $400. Middle quintile is 160. Then it starts going upside down in the fourth quintile, minus 149. The highest quintile is minus 1,726. Okay, and this is per person, not per group, obviously. And then the top 1% is minus $728. So again, the highest quintile, they're running a deficit. Okay, and this is I said that backwards. This is per group, per billions instead, not individual people. I just wanted everybody to understand that. This is in billions. So you can see that 1.7 trillion, that's 728 billion, minus for the highest quintile, the top 1% is minus 728 billion, and the highest quintile is $1.7 trillion in the red. So this just illustrates it in a different way.
Yeah, I don't know if you've ever, it was kind of a comedy show, but it was decent at points. If you ever watched The West Wing.
I did not. I watched a couple episodes. I didn't watch much.
There was one episode, every once in a while, they would make a conservative point. And one of them, one episode, the Rob Lowe character, Sam Seaborn, was striking out a speech that a bunch of progressive Democrats had written for the president, where they said, we're going to hit them where they hurt. So you talk about how they're getting more yachts and more airplanes. And he's like, yeah, I'm leaving that out. This sounds like it was written by a high school girl. And first of all, one of the women in the room said, is there something wrong with the way girls write? And he said, usually there is when they're in high school. Just like there's something the way boys write when they're in high school. It's just the way it is. But he said, look, the last year that I worked at whatever law firm it was he worked at, I paid 22 times more than the average income tax rate. He said, I pay my fair share, and the fair share of 22 other people. He said, and I'm happy to, because that's the way it works. But the water doesn't come out of my faucet 22 times hotter. The fire department doesn't come to my house 22 times quicker. Okay. The rich bear the largest brunt of the tax burden in our society, and we don't need to smack them over the head for doing that.
I hear you. Yep. And we'll sum it up, Russ, and we'll get on to our next subject, because we've been rolling for a while already.
Yeah, we tend to do that.
We're gonna have to change. We're gonna have to change what we're gonna do here. But
it's all right.
For our pod listeners, reading the slides to you, raising corporate taxes benefits foreign billionaires, company, and investors. Should be patently obvious why. When you raise the taxes, billionaires in this country are going to do things like sell their assets. You got China owning so much of American farmland, companies, corporations have real estate.
They're going to root in. They're going to nest themselves into foreign countries. Why do you think so many? Why do you think so many corporations choose Ireland as their corporate headquarters? Because it's got a lower corporate tax rate.
Right. Raising corporate taxes lowers wages, encourages overseas and out-of-state California fuckers. Manufacturing lowers employment rate and decreases benefits. That's a bottom line. When you raise corporate taxes, they hire fewer people. Okay.
They also, maybe I'm not trying to preempt you on this, but they also raise prices because corporations aren't just going to absorb that cost. That cost gets passed on to us. It gets passed on us in the form of higher prices that you're paying, so that basically you're paying those taxes for them because they're not going to eat it.
No, absolutely. You're absolutely right. Since 1986, during the height of Reaganomics, the number of American corporations has declined. Isn't that some shit? When the world, what am I trying to say? When the wealth of the world has increased exponentially, when consumption has increased exponentially throughout the world of everything, the number of American corporations has declined. That is fucking terrible. That is a terrible thing. Last but not least, those of us that are familiar with Reagan, we heard a lot of stuff about Reaganomics, voodoo economics. Trickle-down effect is not an evil plot. It is a rising tide that floats all boats. And what by trickle-down or Reaganomics was, it was to lower corporate taxes, to invest in things that actually would give you value-based products back that were a return on investment. When you throw money into such things such as, and I'm not saying people shouldn't get help that need it, but when you throw money into such things as welfare or some of these other subsidy programs that have been around since, good old Roosevelt, what happens is that money doesn't go anywhere. It goes once down the system, doesn't get taxed, and that's it. When you do things like lower corporate taxes, they hire more people, they raise wages, prices go down. And so what happens is that tax money ends up going down the system several times, okay? A corporation pays less taxes, so it pays more money to Joe. Joe then goes to the store and buys more shit and pays taxes on that. Or maybe Joe has a small business then and is able to put his kids through college and pays tuition, so on and so on and so on until it hits the end user at the very bottom of the chain. That might sound like, oh, the bottom of the chain. That's not a judgment. That's just the way the math works. So everybody benefits in Reaganomics, not just a subset of the population. Go ahead and wrap it up for us, Russ.
Yeah, I just want to make one other real quick point. When people deride trickle-down economics, let's not forget that trickle-down was not something Reagan ever said. There was supply-side economics, which is pretty much encompassed by what Koop just said. Trickle-down was an aphorism that Teddy Kennedy came up with in 1981 in order to deride supply-side economics. He made that up because he knew it would play well. I mean, Teddy Kennedy was good at coming up with headlines. That's all he did. But supply-side economics is about if a company has more money, they're not putting it in some Scrooge McDuck gold vault and swimming through it on a daily basis. What they're doing is, like you said, they're hiring more workers. They're buying more equipment, which, by the way, has to be manufactured by somebody, which gives those people jobs, which encourages more trade. All right. There's a reason why more than 50% of the world's population has been lifted out of abject poverty in the last 40 years. It's thanks to capitalism and companies actually having incentive to make more money and keep more of their own money.
Amen. I just have one last thing to say, Russ. Boom.
Boom.
How do you like me now? And you're welcome. All right. Good talk. Good talk. We're going to take a quick break here before we get to the end of our podcast. And we have a very, very, very important commercial message for you. Don't tune out. Yes, I recorded a new commercial. Hopefully it's kind of funny.
Okay. Commercial for who?
What's that?
Commercial for who?
Us.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. The other one was a little out of date, so I recorded a new one and mixed it today. All right, so how about we hit Culture Wars and go into new movies, because the Donald Trump thing's not going away anytime soon.
Fine with me.
Okay, and we can kind of start with that maybe next time.
Okay.
All right, we still recording, right? Okay.
Yep.
Welcome back to the Two Grumpy Bastards. I'm here with one of the smartest people on God's green earth, Russ.
Well, that might be a bit of an overstatement, but I appreciate it.
It was, but hey, one of the smart.
I'll take the ego stroking.
You are literally maybe the smartest person I've talked to today.
Well, all day. Oh, that's
All day.
impressive.
But it's like not even a little bit over halfway through Sunday. Yes. So we're going to I'll go ahead and take this. We're going to do a small segment on the fake, and that's in quotation marks, culture wars. Go ahead, Russ.
Okay, so I was on social media, as I am prone to do, and I was on an author's page that I tend to like this author. Guy's name is Kevin Anderson. He's written some Star Wars books. And he was praising a couple of movies that had been out, one of which was Top Gun Maverick. I don't remember the other one, but both were pretty successful movies over the last year. And somebody made the point of, hey, look how well movies do when you take the woke stuff out. And people jumped on him, including Anderson himself, and said, I'm so tired of these fake culture wars. I didn't have time right then to engage. I was getting ready to go somewhere, and folks know that I don't usually pass something by that's so stupidly written. The culture wars aren't fake. The culture wars were begun by the left. And what it is they're pissed off people have noticed that they started the culture wars, and they're even more pissed off that people have started to fight back in the culture wars. They believe that whatever they put out should be seen as gospel, whether it is, men playing women's sports, whether it is, let's tell your kids about sexuality in schools, whether it is, everybody gets a trophy. They simply believe that this stuff should be promulgated without question, and folks should just go along with it. So in my experience, people calling the culture wars fake are simply pissed off that people have noticed that, hey, or have spoken out and said, hey, this is not something we particularly want. We're going to fight back on this. Either that, or you're too, it's either that or you're too stupidly ignorant and naive. You're so naive and ignorant, you probably don't belong in a grown-up conversation.
Yeah, you're 100% right. And my big thing on the culture wars too is, you don't know this yet, but one of our Two Grumpy Bastards Academy is going to be the tactics of the leftist debate in the culture wars. We're going to give a primer on the tools and tactics they use, because they don't have logic or facts under their side. So it's good to know these things.
They got a lot of feels.
They got a lot of feels. Yes, they do. I got a lot of feelings, Russ. I can show you a couple of places in my anatomy where they're more concentrated than others. Now I will get kicked off of YouTube if I do that. My big thing on this is the culture wars are real, and here's one of the reasons you can tell. Because anytime you disagree with statements from the left, and I'm talking culture wars between the left and the conservative/libertarian movement. That's what we're defining as culture war. I mean, do you agree with that, Russ?
Yeah, I'd say between the left and even moderate American culture, the problem is that most of the folks in the middle don't want to speak up about it. So there's a large swath of people who are like, hey, they don't like the confrontation, so they won't say anything. And it's left to people like myself and you to actually say, hey, this is bullshit, and push back.
Yes, absolutely. And one of the biggest reasons that it's real is because when you disagree with any of their axioms or disagree with any of their statements or their current zeitgeist or gestalt that they're putting out there in shovelfuls, you get called ad hominem type names. They go to ad hominem, they call you names. They call you terrible names, things like racist and homophobe and transphobe and Nazi or Bible thumper or any of these other things. That's how you can tell there's a culture war. When it degrades into that immediately and saying, you know what, I disagree with you, and this is why, you're a fucking Nazi, you're a bigot, you're a transphobe. That's when you know there's a war on, because if there wasn't a war on, we'd still be having conversations like they did in the 80s, even into the early 90s. And that's, in my opinion, where it started going askew to a very large degree. But that is the biggest, to me, the lead indicator, or maybe that's a lagging indicator actually, of the culture war being in full effect. There is no room for discussion or opinion. We're not Americans anymore. We have been defined by our parties and our beliefs. And George Washington said something very important, and I'm paraphrasing, but he basically said, political parties are supposed to be on the periphery of the nation and not defining the nation. But now they define the nation. The nation no longer is its thing, with the periphery of political parties trying to decide what method is best to preserve that nation. Go ahead, Russ.
Well, I think one of the things that is so important when you talk about why they go to the ad hominem attacks so quickly is because to them, their views are who they are. So if you disagree with what they're saying, they view it as an attack upon themselves as a person. It's not an idea to be discussed. You are attacking their right to exist in their eyes. Because the statement of the 60s, I believe, was that the political is personal. Well, if you are defined by the way you see the world in some way, then if someone disagrees with you on that and takes issue with it, you're going to think that they are viewing you as an evil person, and you're not an evil person. I do not know a single person throughout history, including people who actually were evil, like Hitler and Genghis Khan and Jeffrey Dahmer. So few people actually see themselves as evil. Everyone believes that they are doing good. Therefore, if you are a good person, someone who is disagreeing with you and attacking you on that kind of personal level must by default be evil. And they have to go defeat that evil. And then they also have to put it in the strongest terms. The whole, you're doing stuff like Hitler or you're a racist. Those attacks have lost all meaning because they apply them to everything.
Mm-hmm.
You can only call me a poopy head so many times before I no longer give a shit.
Right. No, I hear you. And you're right. They have lost their meaning. The part of my problem is that we still have a large majority of folks that in this country, the silent majority, and they're not engaging in this culture war. And my big thing is now I'm fighting back. And that doesn't mean violence or going out there and trying to aggravate people or starting fights. That means when I hear it, I'm going to deal with it. When I see it, when it becomes personal to me, when people come at me with things like Nazi and transphobe and stuff like that, I'm going to shut you the fuck down.
You're big enough to do it. Trust me.
Yeah. And let me tell you, one of the things I love about cognitive behavioral therapy, which every American should be on, in my opinion, is that it identifies things like feelings and thoughts as not who you are, but things that you experience. And since they're things you experience, and there are such a thing as irrational thoughts based on experience, there's such a thing as irrational behaviors, and there's such a thing as feelings not being realistic to the environment that you're in. Like you have a stimuli in it, and your feelings from it may be completely hyperbolic, maybe completely inexplicably wrong in context. That's the thing I love about cognitive behavioral therapy is it doesn't say everything you feel and think is okay. It's not. And I think if you're not actively working on trying to have some type of control over your feelings and actively working to, where are my thoughts? Where are they coming from? Why do I believe those? And start from a place of rational, empirical logic first. I don't want to talk to you because it's a waste of my time and it's a waste of your time. It's trying to teach a pig how to sing, and it just won't work.
Well, first of all, I've told both of my children, my oldest specifically, because my youngest is only just starting to grow into this. But I've told my oldest, look, you can believe anything you want. You're your own person. I can't dictate that. I say, what I want you to do, though, is understand why you believe it. Sit down and think it through. Because I've actually sat down and I've thought through virtually every position I have. Does this make sense? Does it not make sense? If it doesn't make sense, what does?
Yeah.
Why did I have that emotional reaction? Is it justified? And so few people actually think through their positions. They merely react. And that can be dangerous because it leads to all kinds of, people think they have good intentions and that should be enough. There's a reason saying exists. The road to hell is paved with good intentions. The second thing, you brought up the vast swath of the silent majority. Despite what we see in chat rooms and, on the news every night, the vast majority of people are actually non-confrontational. It makes them uncomfortable to get into a situation where they disagree with someone, especially someone that they know, because it creates a cognitive dissonance inside their minds. So that's why so many people are not speaking up. That's why I mentioned that a lot of the people on the left have reacted tribally and they will go along with the nonsense because they're afraid of being yelled at. They think, well, the right has gone away in the past, so they'll go away this time, and people will leave me be. First of all, we ain't going away this time. All right, we've had enough. You pushed too far. The culture war's in full swing, and you brought this on. But people have to start engaging, because, like I said earlier, with the LeBron James to the WNBA or Christian Pulisic to the U.S. Women's National Team, until it gets high visibility, the perception in the overall zeitgeist is going to hold sway, and usually that is whoever can yell the loudest. Well, you're going to have to push back on that. Otherwise, a tiny fringe minority is going to take control simply because they can yell the loudest. And again, like you, Koop, I'm not advocating any violence or anything, but I do want to bring up a point that during the American Revolution, we like to paint it nowadays as if it was, the vast united colonies rising up to take on England. That's not even close to the truth. It's about 15% of the American colonies supported the revolution, and then there was about 10 to 15% on the Tory side that actively supported wanting to stay with England. So you look at it, you got about 70% of the colonies at the time just wanted to be left alone. It was similar during the American Civil War. We play up the conflict more than it is, but most people simply do not have stomach for the conflict, and they're going to find themselves in a situation they don't like simply because they didn't want to get involved.
Yeah, I get it. I do. Unfortunately, now's the time. I hate to say it and I hate to compare it, but I'm talking to some of my friends of faith, and I said, we're going through a period of history now where it's Nero's circus all over again. It really is. It's the 1st century AD. It's the 2nd century AD. And Nero is evil and the lions are hungry. And that doesn't just apply to Christians and people of Judeo-Christian faith. That applies to people of and largely people of conservative and libertarian viewpoints are people of faith, very high percentage. But I'm not talking about that. I'm not getting churchy. I'm talking about and it's true. It's absolutely true. I mean, the anti-Christian stuff I still see out there is just amazing to me. But it's conservatism and people who are moral libertarians in general. They're coming after us, and social media and I said it last podcast, the universities, the public education school system, Hollywood has empowered these people to think that they can. The problem is, folks, this is World War II. This is the attack on Pearl Harbor. And like the famous Japanese admiral said, a sleeping giant is being awoken. And that's not going to go well for the other side. And I'm not making any violence and gun. No, I'm just saying it won't go well for the other side. It was better off just being you and not stirring the fucking pot.
Yeah, it'll be shunted back to the fringes. The pendulum swings on these things. It swung too far one way and it's going to swing back, and folks won't like the way it swings back. Again, before anybody out there tries to say the violence thing, no one's advocating that. We're talking about the cultural inclinations of the vast majority of the populace. One of the reasons I speak out so much and so loudly is, in my experience, for every person that speaks out, there are at least a dozen, usually more, that would like to speak out but feel fearful of it.
Yeah.
So in the cultural milieu, what is required is momentum of some kind, the breaking of the inertia. Because like I said, most people are non-confrontational, but they'll join the winning side. That's what happens in like the primaries. It's one of the reasons why Donald Trump won the primary in 2016 was because he started gaining momentum. People wanted to be part of the winning side, so they just kind of voted for him as he got more and more. So as people push back, as we see normality reintroduced into society by calling out the crazies, more and more people will feel comfortable getting on that train. And my prediction is 25 years from now, people are going to look back on this with the same kind of, what the fuck, as they look back on some of the excesses of the 60s, or look back on the pre-civil rights era. Hey, how did we all participate in that kind of stupid stuff? Well, it took some momentum before people were finally saying, okay, yeah, it is wrong to discriminate based on race. It is wrong to try to hold separate stuff for people of different races. That kind of cultural momentum can be seen throughout history. And so if you can gain enough of it, you'll gain more people, which will get you more momentum, which will gain you even more people, so on and so forth.
Yep. I think that's well said. I don't have anything else to say about that. I'm looking at the time, Russ, and I think we're going to have to table our two other subjects for next time.
I agree. I think we've gone a little bit long, but at least we know we've got lots to talk about.
Yeah, no, we got a couple of good subjects, and there's a lot more out there. Believe me, I got some videos that I'm brewing that I think people will be interested in seeing. So maybe we can try to do something a little bit sooner than next Sunday. I don't know. We'll see how that goes. And I will be sending you the next the primer for the next 2 Grumpy Bastards Academy. So
Awesome.
we'll help educate the masses doing that. Having a lot of fun. I hope you guys are having fun out there. I got to say, Russ didn't even react to my last 2 background changes.
I figure, I don't even, what I'm seeing here looks like a scene out of The Golden Child.
Isn't that nice? This is a photo I took at a beach dinner that I had many years ago, a crab dinner on the beach. Kind of cool.
I keep expecting you to go, namaste.
I know. Yeah, that's what it looks like. Right here, let me do a Corona. This will be for the shot on YouTube. Ready?
Okay.
There we go. Looking good. All right. All right. Well, we're going to sign off. I think I said everything I need to say in the commercial. So do you need to plug anything, Russ?
Nope, no, not for right now. I think we're just chugging along, and we got some folks agreeing with us, and we're pissing the right people off. So,
I do want to tell everybody before we go, there is a TikTok page for us, but I had my first video immediately taken down, and I got a strike. So 3 strikes, and we get banned for life. So I thought that was interesting. It was just an educational video about fascism. And got taken down immediately. So we'll see how that goes. We may not have that TikTok account for long.
A Chinese communist spy app has disagreed with our take on fascism. I'm shocked.
I will admit I threw that out there as a little bit of kind of spinning my reel and seeing what would happen, what would bite. And sure enough, I went back to look at it like 10 minutes later, and warning. This constitutes a strike. 2 more and you will be banned for permanently. I'm like, wow, I didn't even cuss during that discussion we had. So anyway, all right. But you can find us on all the other social media outlets, of course, as mentioned before. But Russ and I got to get out of here. We're busy guys, but we love being here with you. And anything for our folks out there in YouTube Podland, Russ, before we sign off?
Nope, I'm just as expressive as ever.
Absolutely. So for Koop and Russ, 2 Grumpy Bastards podcast. Keep your focus and stay hopeless.